Everyone's experienced this at least some point in their life where they're in this zone, in this flow, where everything seems to be going your way, when the actions you're taking are effortless, like you're playing piano, playing basketball, playing a video game, reading, creative writing. You're in this point where nothing seems difficult. You're not thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about what this means for you or the world. You're focused in the moment on the task at hand or at the thing you're doing or at the movie you're watching. And time seems to be flowing in a different way. There is a richness to life that is experienced in these moments of flow and in these moments of presence that you don't get in normal life. And science forever and ever hasn't had a reason for why this could happen, how flow states work, why they exist, and more importantly, why they end. Isn't it a bit weird that when you're in this moment of flow, suddenly you start to think about, whoa, like I'm on the best streak of my life in Call of Duty, or I'm on like a pace to have my record amount of points in a basketball game, or I haven't missed a note so far while practicing this piano piece. Somehow you notice how well it's going or how incredible the moment is. And this moment of flow is ruined by noticing and observing the moment itself. This moment of observation actually ruins the moment itself, which is super weird. And there is no current explanation for why this might exist in science or in biology. So this is universal across every domain, and everyone knows that in some way self-observation destroys your performance in your flow state. But why? And science has had some explanations for parts of these things already. So in neuroscience and cognitive science, it's already very well known that the default mode network is heavily associated or correlated to these states of flow. It's already known that the default mode network is the center for the brain's self-referential processing, this sense of I, the sense of coherence, basically the home of the ego, your coherent sense of self. And the ego is a differentiating engine. So it differentiates me from you, this from that, here from there, hot from cold, good from bad. All of this self-referential processing, what this means for me, how this relates to my world and the world out there and me to the world itself. All of this is self-referential processing that takes place in the default mode network. So there's actually been a lot of research on this front, and Menon in 2023 had some incredible research connecting the default mode network and its suppression to performance. And before that, in 2020, Leroy and Cheron recorded this during like Tightrope performances, actually measuring the brain as people were in these flow states on tightropes that were kind of induced flow states by forcing you to focus and reduce your self-referential processing by walking on these tightropes. They found that flow states, the association of flow states and the reduced sense of self was required with transient hypofrontality. So basically the brain stops asking like, how am I doing on this? And it just has to focus on doing the thing. It doesn't have time to think about the judgments or the evaluations or the observations or the judgment values on how good of a time is happening right now. You have to just be in the moment itself. And so importantly in neuroscience, Carhart-Harris and all back in 2014 and in more recent research as well have found alpha oscillations in the brain regions most associated with self-referential processing explain 66% of the variance in ego dissolution. When taking psilocybin, the ego dissolution was heavily correlated to the alpha oscillations in certain brain regions heavily associated with self-referential processing. So this gets pretty weird. You have to wonder, well, how in the world would self-referential processing have anything to do with one's physical performance or mental performance? Why is there some sort of inverse correlation here? Less on one side creates more on the other. What is this trade-off going on here? And what's actually happening? So a little bit more evidence has started to appear here when you start to piece it into the thermodynamic landscape of the brain. So consider this. The brain is 2%-ish of the body's mass, but it uses 20% of the body's energy. So that's already significant energy density inside the brain versus the rest of the body. And not only that, but the default mode network itself is known to run 40% above the energy baseline of the rest of the brain. So the default mode network is taking up even more energy than the rest of the brain, let alone the rest of the body. So there is massive energy density going on here in the default mode network. So what we can associate from that is that the default mode network is most responsible for self-referential processing, which means that self-referential processing is the single most expensive thing per unit of space, you may say, that the brain can do. So then what's happening when the default mode network is silenced during these flow states? So when there's a quiet in the default mode network, you have increased flow states. So this seems to point to some sort of energy trade-off, that the most expensive thing in the body is getting turned off, and then your performance is increasing somewhere else, which would hypothesize to the fact that maybe the energy is important here, that somehow the energy is going from one area, and now you have more energy to spend in another area, which increases your performance and your sense of presence, okay? Now we have this connection between energy from one side to the other. So Troubat et al. In 2009 found that elite chess players are able to evaluate billions of these possible moves in these flow states while playing chess, but only increasing their energy spent by about 10% above rest, which from classical physics and biology should make absolutely no sense. Because when you're in this performance state playing chess, you are evaluating so many potential moves and so far into the future. The combinatorial explosion of how many computations you would have to make to predict and intuit these types of movements is unfathomable. Except they're only spending above 10% above baseline. So somehow they're doing way more computation with barely more energy. So there is some sort of exponential growth going on here. Just like in the flow research, in this chess research, there's something not adding up about the energy budget versus the computational power that we're witnessing in biology. So there's only one type of computation that we know of that could produce this type of effect, and that's quantum. It's an extremely efficient computational regime. The problem with quantum computing in the traditional quantum computing world is that the computation isn't what's expensive. What's expensive is making the computation possible. You have to spend tons of energy to reduce the temperature and reduce the interference in a quantum computer. But is it possible that at some point over all these years, evolution in biology has found a way to harness quantum benefits, the exponential gains that quantum can provide in an efficient manner? And this has forever, for a long time, thought to be impossible in the brain. Too noisy, too wet, and too warm is the classic Tegmark argument against quantum computations in the brain. But the world of quantum has had a massive revolution in the last 10, 15 years, and especially in the last 3. So the dial already began to shift in the 2010s as quantum biology found that photosynthesis is a quantum process fundamentally. And then also bird migration. It seems that birds use electromagnetic signals and a quantum process fundamentally for migration. And in 2020, a paper was published by Chow et al. And I posted another video about this paper because it's truly mind-blowing. But what they found in the paper was that they were solving, there was like 18 researchers who came together to finally solve the question, does photosynthesis, the most important process in biology on Earth for life, use quantum processes? And what they found was it does, but it's not through coherence like quantum computers do. It's actually through very short bursts of coherence, and the decoherent process, the process of losing coherence, is actually how the mechanism itself works. So they were saying decoherence is part of the process. You don't have to maintain the coherence and spend all the energy to maintain coherence like quantum computers do. And this is a mind-blowing revelation. Like, I cannot emphasize how mind-blowing this is. And it has really been missed in a lot of quantum biology. And so this is where my collaborator, Jack Tazinski, absolutely hits a home run here as he focuses on the fact that biology is an open system. We're an energy pumping metabolic system. We intake energy from the sun or from food, and we translate it into usable energy. And that energy can be used to sustain quantum processes in the body. And that has been what was completely overlooked in quantum biology or in biology at large in the last 25 years. And the big breakthrough was in 2023 when Kalra et al. Showed that microtubules, which are structures inside the cytoskeleton inside cells, can harness quantum energy migration in similar ways to photosynthesis. So it's comparable to the photosynthetic complexes that are happening already known in biology. The next big breakthrough was a year later, Babcock et al. In 2024. They actually showed that the quantum effects get larger as the networks increase, which is inverting the standard assumption, because generally when networks increase, there's more interference. It's a more complex system, which should create more decoherence and be more difficult for structures to maintain coherence. But again, this is not taking into account the fact that biology is an energetic open system. And so when you pump energy into the system, it can actually maintain coherence for larger networks. And this is where Patwa et al. In 2024, Nishiyama et al. 2024, 2025, Curry in 2025, Jack's work with Travis Craddock and his work with Cavaglia et al. In 2023 and 2025. All of this is pointing to the fact that microtubules are truly quantum structures that have quantum properties. And not only that, but the structures at these scales seem to be quantum enabled in a variety of ways, including the membrane and how you might be able to store memory. And there's a lot of aspects here that have become extremely plausible in the last literally 2 years. And this has been absolutely blowing the minds of people in the quantum biology side, but it hasn't reached mainstream biology yet. So all of this to say is, well, then is the brain utilizing these quantum processes in some way? And is this what's associated with flow? So is it possible that somehow these things are reaching the microtubules? That's the question. And well, great question, because in science, there's already evidence that the microtubules can feel the effects of the default mode network all the way down a causal chain. So Pinotsis et al. In 2023 showed that microtubules and the cytoskeleton at large can react to electromagnetic fields from neural activity, and they interact right where the quantum coherence would be living in these systems. And then Wiest 2025 showed that microtubules can feel, he used that language, feel the neural activity through calcium dynamics, calcium exchange at the cytoskeleton level, and that they react to the electromagnetic fields in that sense as well. So there is literally this connection top down from way larger scales, default mode network, all the way down to the quantum scales, and this communication can exist. And that's what the book in the description is showing, and the papers that we're working on are showing. This causal chain already exists in science. It just hasn't been hypothesized to exist as one chain together. And so now we can see that this trade-off is actually mechanistically plausible. And so it has a real mechanism, the default mode network, the electromagnetic output, all the way down to the quantum hardware. And the key variable is the energy pumping. And the energy landscape, when it changes, the default mode network is the most energy expensive process in the brain. So when it quiets, it opens up more energy to be spent in other places, which may enable the extended quantum coherence or more parts of the brain to be coherent. And this is where the energy is now going. And that would explain the improvements in pattern recognition, performance, cognitive performance, creativity, insight, and these types of things that happen during flow states. Fundamentally, what is flow then? Well, then flow is a thermodynamic process between a dial of a lot of quantum and less quantum. And that is decided by the amount of self-referential processing happening in the default mode network, which is associated with your ego, your sense of self, your meaning structure about the world, and all of your beliefs. And these beliefs would then constrain how much of the quantum you're receiving or you are able to access, and reducing it through this belief process, this funnel. And then in that, you now have to access a smaller amount of information in a classical regime, which reduces how quickly you can process the information and even what information is available for you to access in the first place. And so this is why, while in flow states or these moments of insight, it feels like they might arrive whole or much more constructed than if-then logic would be in traditional, brainstorming or logic, if-then logic of a system too, in that sense. So in cognitive science, there's system 1 and system 2, which is the fast parallel thinking and the slow sequential thinking, GPU, CPU in computer language. And this makes a lot of sense in a quantum brain world. You have quantum on one side, a quantum regime on one side, and the classical neuronal structures on the right side. And so you have fast on one side and slower on the other, quantum on one side, classical on the other. And that would be the shift between flow states and not flow states, depending on the amount of self-referential thinking, your identities and your beliefs, and the constraints that are currently on your system for quantum processing. So that is where we're at right now on this question of what is flow and why does it create such powerful moments of experience and presence and insight. It's pretty cool. And it points to a lot of what is possible for humanity in these moments of reduced self-thought, these moments of reduced self-reflection, and in general, reduced default mode network activity. So hopefully that creates a lot of interesting thoughts for you. And there's a lot more research down in the description below on exactly these ideas. And I've been talking about all these ideas on the channel for a while now. So go check them out. And thanks for hanging. And we'll talk very soon. See ya.